All right, good morning. This one got my attention so much I decided to look at this before I even jump in the shower. This is from zdnet.com. Why don't more people use the desktop Linux? And this gentleman has a theory that you might not like. Well, that might be true, so let's take a look at this. He has been using Linux since 1997, and it's only failed me on one rare occasion. You can take that or leave that. I think I'll leave it. But he says those early years it wasn't exactly easy. Aha, that's probably why I became so familiar with the OS very early on. I guess he focused on one OS, which would make sense. Today's Linux is not yesterday's Linux. Now, the platform is incredibly easy to use. Again, Gentoo is not easy. Arch, Linux from scratch. You can say some Linux is easy to use, but let's move on. So it's just so simple now. Given that, why aren't more people using Linux on the desktop? Well, let's see here. To give you the idea of the numbers, it was recently reported that Linux surpassed macOS as the second most used operating system for gaming. Linux hitting the 3% 3% threshold in desktop market share. Well, if you count Chromebooks, that's like 7%. Okay, so here's the thing. Over the last few years, I developed a theory as to why Linux has yet to really take over the desktop. By all accounts, it should have. I would have to agree. Let's see here. On top of that, the majority of desktop use cases these days are centered on the web browser. Focus on that, the web browser. That alone kind of kicks to the curb the idea that lack of applications is the issue, stopping so many from using Linux. You can probably tell where I'm going with this, focusing on the web browser, Chrome OS Flex, Chromebooks. That's why Linux has jumped in usage, even though most consumers have no idea Chromebooks are built on Linux. So he says, so what's the problem? Open source, community, cover your ears or your eyes. This one made me laugh. Thank you, sir. The problem is the lack of a representative version of Linux. What he's saying is, what is an official version of Linux? Now, that can be anything that you pick. But for the consumer masses, to me, the official version of Linux, if there is such a thing, would be Chrome OS in a Chromebook, because they have proven themselves over the years. All right, so when someone comes to ask how to get into Linux, they do not need to hear a laundry list of distributions to choose from. When they ask, I don't want to have to say, you could try Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Elementary, Zorn, or Ubuntu Budgie. Although that's true, it can be overwhelming for someone who's never even seen the operating system in action. That is true. That's why I have a top 3 for new users, or for everybody. That would be Chrome OS, Flex, Linux Mint, and Zorn. All right, let's continue. But the reality is every single Linux user has an opinion on what distribution is best suited for new users. That's true. Sadly, that variety of opinions doesn't help the cause. Okay, let's move on. So he says, consider this an official Linux distribution. Think about if there's one distribution that becomes the official flavor as a choice. Again, I say this as a choice, not to replace the other ones. So don't panic out there. A few things could possibly happen. First, there'd be less confusion for new users. I've been saying this for the last 10 years. If someone wants to try Linux, they turn to the official Linux, or whatever you want to call that. That version of Linux would be user-friendly, stable. It would be geared toward you. So let's take a look at Chromebooks. Is it user-friendly? For the most part, it is. The learning curve is much less than, say, Arch, right? A super easy file manager, web-centric, web-focused, and super reliable. There is no maintenance when you buy a Chromebook. Either it works or it doesn't work. Either it's fast or it's defective. Let's say your second, companies that want to port their software or make their hardware available to Linux wouldn't be faced with making it work for hundreds of distributions. That's true. Last I checked, with all the forks and offshoots, there are about 600 choices for Linux. That's not making it easy for the consumer. That's great for the tinkerer. If you are, that's awesome, but not for the consumers. They'd only have to work with a single flavor of Linux. All right, let me know what you guys think about all this. I need to start my day. Take care.